White House border czar Tom Homan is expected to hold his second press conference in Minneapolis later this morning, and we'll have that live. He was sent to Minnesota last week following two fatal shootings involving federal agents. Last week, Homan said he had reached agreements with local and state officials, and that could reduce the amount of federal agents in the city, depending on the cooperation. And moving on now, official figures from the health department show that nearly 50 million Americans are suffering from substance abuse disorder, and almost 3 million are suffering from what's referred to as severe substance abuse disorder. That means they're unable to function in ordinary society. 3 million. The report says of this marginalized group, homelessness and mental illness complicate their predicament. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced a new pilot program on Monday to help homeless people find jobs and treat their addiction. Joining us now to discuss the announcement is Dr. Shannan Crawford. She's a psychologist and the CEO of Crawford Clinics. Dr. Shannan, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you again. Welcome.
Good to see you. Thank you.
And I found Kennedy's words announcing the Streets Initiative quite profound, in part because he himself has recovered from heroin addiction through a 12-step program. Rather than me peppering you with questions, I'd rather just play the Secretary's words and have you react to them. So let's play the first one now.
Addiction is about isolation. It's a disease of isolation. Addicts end up alone. They burn their relationships. They lose their jobs. They end up in rooms or jails or institutions or dead. And the ultimate solution to that is reconnecting people to community.
Dr. Shannan, I never really heard it described in that way, that it's about isolation. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. If we don't address the underlying traumas and areas where people are discontent in their own soul, that's driving them to isolate, and then the addiction becomes the comfort, the relationship, in an unhealthy, toxic way. If we're not addressing those dynamics and just behavior modification, which historically has been a strong push in addiction models, then we're not really addressing the underlying issue for meaning, purpose, spirituality, and community to drive people back into healthy relationship.
Yeah, what you're describing is a much more 360 holistic approach, and I think that's what Kennedy is trying to get at. Let's play the second soundbite.
When we cut off our relationships with other human beings, we lose that access to the divine, and that is a healing power. We are in a spiritual malaise in this country, and we need to give people access to all different ways of reconnecting with something that is higher than themselves.
The macro view that he just took in that soundbite was quite startling to me. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Back to your point of 360, we have to treat people more holistically. Addiction is usually a symptom of much deeper root issues. Our central nervous system is trying to self-medicate. We're trying to drink our problems away, cut the edge off of stress, denial, coping mechanisms, and often trauma. So when there's a lack of meaning, purpose, lack of agency, buried, suppressed trauma, then many times addiction is the way to medicate that. And if you're just changing the addiction, it'll pop up in another area. And that's what we see clinically all the time is you may behavior modify where you reduce substance abuse, but you're not actually going to treat the soul. And usually it will come back with a vengeance in some other area of their life. So I love the holistic approach that he's offering.
Yeah, you talk about treating the soul, which potentially is where the root of that trauma may exist that then gets buried with these coping mechanisms. I'd love for you to describe what this pilot program, the Streets program, is, and is it very different from what preceded it? I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, I love any time that mental health is being targeted with an addiction program. Historically, there were almost buckets where things were sequestered and separated artificially, but we're all one person. So if you're going to treat addiction, then you also want to treat the trauma. You want to treat the emotional well being of the soul, putting people back into community. And then he has an emphasis on allowing faith based programs to be a part of those that are getting grants. Historically, that has not always been the case. It's really sequestering people away from faith driven programs because of artificial government restraints. And so I think he's trying to reintegrate body, soul, and spirit, which we know is how people actually get back together. And there's a wellness in your soul when you put all three in a harmony.
And I want to focus in on one other element of what he was describing, which was somewhat new to me. He talked about an urgency in reaching youth with addiction because he described something about their neuroplasticity. Can you describe that for us?
Absolutely. It's the brilliance of our design that the brain can shift. So the plasticity, it's not literal plastic, but the fact that our brain can shift and you can change hard wiring, and the younger, the better. So the longer someone stays in patterns of addiction, the harder it can be to get out of it. So trying to be more proactive, like we've seen in some other countries, to really address the younger generation is wisdom rather than reactive, where people are homeless and they're already in years of addiction. While that's noble and it's good and we should continue it, ideally we want to get a younger generation before their lives go off the rails. So I love the comprehensive at a societal level approach.
Now, as we start to finish up, this program is intended to treat the most severely affected by addiction and those who have these other, homelessness, mental illness. But almost 20%, or I think even just slightly more than 20% of Americans have some form of passive addiction to alcohol or drugs. Is there any hopes that the learnings from this pilot program could then have more broader societal application?
I think if you can see it piloted well with extreme, then the generalizability to apply it to that 20% of just the normal population that's probably having too much wine, too many pain pills to cut the edge off, it would be really fantastic to see that data applied in more general programs. You would probably need to rebrand it because what people would stigmatize to the extreme, then a lot of people in general population would find stigmatizing. But if we can now apply it with a new branding, that same data, and use that at a larger capacity, I think it would be really exciting to see addiction go down in general.
Dr. Shannan Crawford, very encouraging. Thank you for joining and sharing your insights with us.
You're welcome.